we're going to talk about an elite level college player who goes to the University of Arkansas, Luis Garza. Zach here has been working with Luis for what feels like forever. So Zach, I know you used GravityFit with him this past weekend or a couple weekends ago. Can you talk about what you did with him and how you use GravityFit?
Yeah, so my goal when we started the camp was to help him understand what the flaw was. And for the past 6 months, we've been working on helping him increase his torso rotation and improve his side bend through the ball. And we've used exaggerated drills, we've used speed variability, we've used functional movement tubing to pull him out of positions. And then this last trip, we put the GravityFit on him and we used it. If you go to the top, I'll show you what we did. So what Luis does is he laterally shifts early left and gets very narrow. So what we did is we told him to feel like he pushed the band out and rotated his lower body. And then as you can see, the club shallowed. And Luis is probably a little bit more physically impressive than Arick, but he got into this position and we'll put in his videos. But the reason for the GravityFit wasn't to change the movement. It was to allow him to understand how actually narrow he was. So he started to feel how much more he needed to increase that width in the downswing, and that created the need to build a circuit around the GravityFit.
Cool. So I know I've seen the videos. Pretty impressive, the changes he went through after kind of getting the feedback from GravityFit. Can you talk about how you used GravityFit, the environment that you created, the training circuit that he was going through? I think that kind of goes and ties in well with the spacing variability and challenge that we've talked about in some of the other videos here in the module. Can you touch on that
Sure.
for us?
So with a player that I work with remotely, the most important thing is for them to be able to become their own best coach. So creating the optimal training environment is vital. And the way that I do it is I do it in 2-ball sets. So I did 2 balls where he used the GravityFit and he would come here, he would put the GravityFit on, and he would make 2 learning rehearsals with the GravityFit on. Then he would take it off and hit 1 ball. And then the second ball, he would not use the GravityFit at all in his practice swings and use it for the shot. Okay. And then when he transferred to this next station, he had to apply whatever feelings he created in this situation. And I'm not saying anything for these 6 balls. So he's looking to me like, was that right? And I'm just completely like augmenting my feedback to make him understand. And then when he exaggerated it, when he went to this next station, that was the speed variability station. And he chose where he wanted to start. And he had to get both balls with the ideal numbers on TrackMan. So if his goal was to hit it inside of a specific dispersion, he had to achieve that with both these 2 balls, or he had to start again. And we did this 6-ball set to him it felt like 2 hours. It actually was only 45 minutes when he was able to get all 6 balls successfully. And when he got that, that's when I was allowed to speak again. So for 40 minutes, I didn't say anything. GravityFit obviously doesn't say anything, but what it did is it allowed him to increase his awareness, and then ultimately it allowed him to retain and transfer the new feels onto the golf course. And while I'm sitting here videoing, I'm quickly refreshing golf stat because hopefully he's retaining and transferring it in the final round today in Alabama.
Cool. So a little bit challenge involved within these stations. You have some variability, kind of the tasks that he's having to do, and then there's obviously an element of spacing, only getting to hit 2 balls, the learning trials with the GravityFit. So you're really controlling the amount of feedback he's getting with the device. All right, Zach, so that was an incredible environment that you created for Luis to help apply and adapt that movement that you were trying to get him to achieve. Now, how would you take this same circuit and apply it to even maybe Luis, but back when you first started working with him? So kind of your average golfer, we'll say.
Sure, I think you need to rein it back in. You need to decrease the spacing, you need to decrease the variability, you need to decrease the challenge point, and you ultimately probably need to increase the feedback. So you would add more balls in the TrackMan station, the proximity would get wider. In the station where maybe he was going from the GravityFit to trying to do it on his own, you might actually provide the intervention there, and you might be the one cueing it instead of the player trying to do it themselves.
Cool. So really pretty easy to adjust this circuit to the individual, right?
No, I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
The golf coach that buys a training aid to believe that that training aid is going to create the learning environment is naive. The best golf coaches in the world are the ones that find a way to adapt the training aid to the environment for that athlete, so that that athlete can increase their awareness and ultimately increase their ability to retain and transfer the skill. So in the case study with this elite college player, what we saw was the player struggled with their release pattern. The GravityFit did not change the player's release pattern. What it did is it allowed the player to understand how they needed to externally rotate their shoulder in the transition. It wasn't that the GravityFit pulled them into that position. It was actually that by having to create the width in the transition, the player started to create this understanding of how to load into the trail foot and then create energy. So again, it's not about putting the training aid on to learn. It's about putting the training aid on to expose your fault and then allow you to follow your own pathway to creating an effective change.
I think that's a great point Zach just made there. The goal of a training aid is to provide you feedback, so when you perform a movement, you have something to compare it to. If you don't have this sensation or awareness of what it is you're trying to achieve through something like GravityFit, like Zach was just saying, then when you make the movement, what are you actually comparing it to? So you're using it as something, a comparator, to assess error within the movement, essentially. You can take something very similar to that and you can change the challenge point of it with any level golfer. So you could have the same setup, and by adjusting maybe how many learning trials they get with the actual GravityFit on. So for a beginner golfer, if we're working with a young student, they might get 5 balls versus Luis only getting 2 or 1. So you can change how much feedback they get with the GravityFit, how frequently they get to receive that feedback, and then you can choose how many balls, so how much variability there's going to be at each station, as well as how many different stations you want them to go through.